When the war ended, many soldiers returned with medals, but the real survivors came back with something far more valuable and far more invisible. They came home with lessons that couldn't be told in parades or interviews. Lessons that had no place in textbooks or field manuals. These weren't tactics from generals. They were whispered truths, learned in frozen camps, in disease-ridden barracks, and behind barbed wire where rank meant nothing. They learned how to stay alive by watching the enemy. Prison guards, cold, brutal, and methodical, unwittingly revealed how heat could be trapped without fire, how food could be rationed in silence, and how weakness could be disguised as fever. Fellow prisoners passed secrets with their eyes. Where to hide the last piece of bread, when to fake a collapse, how to drink melted snow without drawing attention. These were not stories. They were survival blueprints written in frost, fear, and bone-deep fatigue. Today, we're unlocking 9 of those brutal lessons. Not theory, not myth, just raw, hard-won knowledge forged in the quietest places war ever touched. These are the skills that weren't recorded, because the ones who needed them never planned to come home. Hit like and subscribe to rediscover the wisdom carved in silence. Number 1, heat mimicry. In the dead of winter, warmth wasn't comfort. It was survival disguised as behavior. Prison guards never taught prisoners how to stay warm. But they didn't have to. Every movement, every habit, every unspoken routine became a silent lesson for those watching through frost-bitten eyes. Prisoners noticed what guards wore: straw tucked under jackets, rags bound tightly around ankles and wrists, scarves layered not for style, but to trap breath. The men behind the rifles were never cold for long, so prisoners copied them. They lined their own uniforms with anything they could find: paper scraps, hay, even grass pulled from beneath snow. They wrapped shirts in torn socks, stuffed sleeves with stolen lint. Layer by layer, they became moving insulation. But warmth wasn't just in fabric. It was in motion. Guards paced constantly. They never stood still. Not for comfort, but because stillness kills. And so prisoners started walking in place, stretching fingers, rotating shoulders, anything to keep blood moving just enough to delay the freeze. At night, some mimicked the guards' fire ritual, placing stones near embers, then wrapping them in cloth to warm their hands without drawing attention. The technique wasn't new, but where it came from made it valuable. They learned by watching those who didn't need to care. Heat wasn't given. It was stolen one glance at a guard's habit at a time. This wasn't luck. It was an adaptation burned into silence. One forgotten skill, one more day alive. Number 2, fever trick. In the camps, work wasn't hard. It was deadly. Frozen marches, stone hauling, rail line digging tasks designed not to complete, but to crush. And every soldier knew one wrong step outside meant frostbite. One bad shift meant collapse. But there was one way out. Sickness. Not real sickness, manufactured sickness. A fever that didn't exist, but looked just real enough to get you pulled from the labor line. And the method spread. Prisoners learned to chew on wood, heating the inside of their mouths to trigger warmth during temperature checks. Others rubbed their skin raw with ash or salt, creating blotches that looked like infection. Even soap, mixed with dirt, smeared beneath the eyes, could mimic exhaustion or jaundice. No one said a word. These weren't conversations. They were glances. A nod. A smear of soot shared silently between bunkmates. The trick wasn't in the act, it was in the timing. Too soon and you were ignored. Too often and you were watched. But just right and you were sent to the infirmary, a cold, dirty room with no medicine. But also no work, no blisters, no frostbite, just space to breathe, to sleep, to wait. It wasn't healing, it was hiding. And for some, that bought 3 extra days alive. The guards never knew they were being studied. Every medic's reaction, every inspection routine, it all became part of a mental map. A catalog of symptoms that didn't need truth, only performance. It wasn't a deception for advantage. It was a deception for breath. One forgotten skill, one more day alive. Number 3. Cough code in the camps. Even whispers could cost you your food, or your face, or your life. Spoken words were dangerous. Guards were always nearby. Informants listened for payoff sometimes for an extra scrap of bread. Eyes were everywhere. Ears never rested. But messages still had to move. So prisoners turned to something universal, something expected, something no one questioned. They used the cough, not the kind that begged for medicine or pity. These were sharp, controlled, deliberate patterns that carried meaning. One short cough during lineup meant, "Be silent, a guard is near." 2 quick coughs before lights out, "Hide it now." 3 spaced evenly before breakfast, "They're coming." No one taught it, no one explained it. But the code spread like instinct. Because it worked. Coughing was constant in the camp, caused by cold, by smoke, by rot inside weak lungs. A cough wasn't suspicious. It was assumed. That made it the perfect disguise. The very thing that revealed your weakness now became your shield. In one barrack near Minsk, a prisoner used 4 slow coughs, each spaced by seconds, to signal the end of a surprise inspection. In another, a jagged, stuttered rhythm meant bread was moving bunk to bunk. One man even faked a coughing fit at the right moment, pulling the guard's attention just long enough for his cellmate to slip a stolen spoon into a crack in the floor. It wasn't just a sound. It was language, a pattern, a pulse, a code hidden inside suffering. Those who learned it moved together, across bunks, across days, across despair. Those who didn't stood alone, vulnerable, unwarned, forgotten. It wasn't strategy from any military manual. It came from necessity, born in cold lungs and broken silence. Every cough had a reason, and every reason could mean one more night alive. This wasn't noise. It was survival in sound. One forgotten skill, one more day alive. Number 4. Crumb discipline. A single crumb wasn't food. It was fuel. It was trade. It was survival, shaved down to its smallest form. Every man had a ration. A piece of bread, hard, stale, crumbling at the edges. It didn't last long. But the ones who lived longer weren't the ones who ate faster. They were the ones who learned to control the crumb. It started with the hands. You didn't break bread in the open. You cupped it, turned your back, and peeled it slowly. Fingers pinched off slivers, no bigger than a fingernail rolled them, swallowed without chewing. Each bite measured, each movement quiet. You never dropped a piece. And if you did, you didn't leave it. Prisoners scoured their beds at night, picking up flakes stuck to shirts, fingers, or floorboards. They licked fabric, chewed crusts from their sleeves. They knew that wasting even a crumb meant shortening your life by a few hours. Some folded their rations into cloth, tied with thread, and hid them in their socks. Others carved indentations into wooden planks, placing bits of bread inside like offerings, then covering them with scraps until the next hunger wave passed. But the discipline wasn't just in the hiding. It was in the patience. Guards often delayed food, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days. Those who cracked early, who ate all at once, they suffered most. But those who rationed instinctively, who treated hunger as a rhythm rather than a crisis, they lasted. And the quietest skill of all? Eating without sound, mouth closed, throat trained, no chewing, no gulping, just slow dissolution bread turning to paste, then gone, no scent, no evidence, no invitation for someone else to take it. That this wasn't eating, it was preservation. Taught not by commanders or manuals, but by watching the man beside you survive one day longer by doing less. One crumb at a time, one forgotten skill, one more day alive. Number 5, silent barter. You couldn't ask for what you needed. Not in front of the guards, not around informants. Even hunger had to stay quiet. But needs didn't disappear. So, in the shadows of the camps, a new economy was born, built entirely on silence. They called it nothing, but it was barter, and it ran deeper than money. A spoonful of sugar for a shred of tobacco. A thread and needle for a crust of bread. A scrap of metal traded for a strip of cloth. Everything had value. Everything moved. But nothing was ever said. Deals began with a glance, a shift in posture, a sleeve rolled up just enough to show a hidden item. The other man responded with a nod, a blink, or by tapping a boot heel twice. That meant yes. Trades happened at night, through floorboards or under bunks. In some barracks, strings were tied from bed frame to bed frame, tugged gently to signal readiness. An item placed at one end would vanish minutes later, replaced by something else. No one spoke. No one dared. If a guard caught you trading, you could lose your ration, your place in line, your teeth, but the trade continued because starvation left no choice. If you didn't have what you needed, you found someone who did and hoped they recognized your signal. Sometimes it failed. One man offered too much too fast. The recipient said nothing, then told the guards. Both men were beaten. After that, the signals grew more complex, more subtle. Entire conversations reduced to eye contact and timing. The true value wasn't in the object, it was in the trust that moved it. You weren't just handing off a crust, you were exposing your hunger, showing what you lacked, what you were willing to give. It was dangerous, but necessary, because nothing survives alone and not even in silence. This wasn't trade. It was a lifeline passed hand to hand without a word spoken. One forgotten skill, one more day alive. Number 6 ash warmth fire was life. But it was also a risk. Guards could spot smoke, smell it, feel its glow in the dark. One visible ember could lead to punishment, confiscation, or worse. So fires, once a comfort, became forbidden. But prisoners didn't give up on heat. They just learned to hide it. They studied the guards' fire pits, how the coals stayed warm long after the flames died. How ash formed a thick skin over heat. How warmth didn't need light. It only needed patience. And so began the ash trick. After a cooking fire was extinguished, prisoners dug beneath the ashes, finding embers that still pulsed with life. Those coals were carefully scooped out, wrapped in cloth, and buried inside crates, under straw or beneath layers of earth and waste. They became silent furnaces. No glow, no smoke, just slow, radiating warmth. Hands hovered over ash piles like relics. Fingers dug gently through layers of soot, just enough to feel the heat. It wasn't much, but it kept skin from splitting. It kept frostbite from crawling past the toes. Some even carried embers wrapped in wool hidden in tin cups or hollowed wood, reigniting them with dried leaves and breath. They passed warmth like others passed bread, carefully, quietly, without ever saying the word fire. In one camp near Lublin, prisoners built ash chambers inside broken stoves. They weren't meant for cooking, just surviving. They lined the interior with stones, poured in warm ash, sealed the top with metal sheets. The outside stayed cold, but inside it breathed. This was not comfort. It was survival disguised as stillness. They learned that warmth didn't need flame, it needed memory. The ash remembered what the fire gave, and the men remembered how to hold it without being seen. No flicker, no light, just the ghost of heat, passed hand to hand without drawing attention. In a world where cold killed slowly and openly, they fought it with something quieter. A handful of ash, a buried ember, and the will to live without being burned. One forgotten skill, one more day alive. Number 7. Fake collapse. Sometimes the only way to stay standing was to fall. Prisoners learned early that work details were not assignments. They were executions in slow motion. Men returned with frozen limbs, cracked ribs, missing fingers if they returned at all. And yet, no one refused. Refusal was a beating. Refusal was death. So instead, they collapsed. Not from weakness, but by design. Veterans of the camps taught the new arrivals how to fall, when to fall, how to make it look real. Not dramatic, just believable. A stumble during roll call, a delayed reaction after a head count, knees buckling halfway to the labor truck. They didn't call it acting. They called it buying time. You had to commit, hit the ground hard, let your body go limp, keep your eyes unfocused. Mumble if they spoke to you just enough to suggest fever or exhaustion. And if you were lucky, the guards wouldn't want the hassle. No one wanted to carry dead weight into a work crew. And that hesitation, that single moment of doubt, it saved lives. But it was risky. If they didn't believe you, you were dragged, beaten, forced to stand. If they did believe you too often, you vanished, sent to isolation. Or worse. That's why it couldn't be overused. You had to wait, watch, choose the moment. A cold morning, a new guard, a gap in the ranks when eyes were elsewhere. And you only did it when your body had already started to fail, because once you used it, you didn't get another try soon. One man near Kiev collapsed right at the camp gate. He rolled his eyes, twitched once, and didn't move. The guards thought he'd seized from hunger. He was tossed into the sick barrack where he found warmth, broth, and 2 full days off his feet. He survived winter because of that moment, because of that fall. They weren't actors. They were students of pain, masters of timing, experts in the choreography of collapse. And when no medicine, no food, and no mercy remained, this was the last tool left. To pretend you were broken. So you didn't actually break. One forgotten skill, one more day alive. Number 8, punishment timing. You could hear survival before you ever saw it. In the camps, punishment wasn't private. It echoed. A boot hitting flesh. A scream cut short. The slap of leather across bone. It wasn't done behind closed doors. It was a lesson for everyone else, but some prisoners weren't just listening out of fear. They were learning. Pain in these places had rhythm, a structure, a sequence, and knowing that pattern could mean the difference between living through it or not living at all. Veteran inmates passed it on quietly. Count the strikes. Note how long the guard hits before he tires. Watch which punishments are for show and which ones are warnings. Know how long you can resist before the beating changes from punishment to punishment with intent. It wasn't sympathy. It was statistics. 5 blows meant a warning. 10 meant obedience. Anything past 15, especially in silence, meant the guard wasn't just trying to hurt you. He was trying to remove you. So the lesson was simple. Don't be the first to speak up. Don't be the last to sit down. If you must take the blow, fall on the second hit. Scream on the third. Let them think they've won early before they get serious. And if someone else was being punished, you watched, you counted, you memorized. One prisoner in Hungary noted that a certain guard always stepped back after the 6th strike. That was his pause point, the moment where most men broke, and he expected submission. If a man braced too early, he hit harder. If a man resisted too long, he lost control. So prisoners timed their surrender, feigned just enough pain at strike 7 to satisfy the pattern. It wasn't weakness, it was mathematics. Even pain had a schedule. You couldn't stop the violence, but you could study it, bend around it, make yourself less of a target, or survive when your turn came. Because when everything else was gone, food, warmth, sleep timing became your only defense. You didn't just learn how to take pain. You learned when to take it. One forgotten skill. One more day alive. Number 9, eye signals. In places where words could kill, the eyes became everything. Language had consequences. A spoken warning could be overheard. A whisper could be misread. Even a shared breath between bunks could draw suspicion. So prisoners stopped speaking, but they didn't stop communicating. They used their eyes, not wide gestures or dramatic looks, just small, intentional movements. A blink, a glance, a stare held 1 second too long. In the camps, those micro-movements carried more meaning than entire sentences, and they were fast, because time was never on their side. If a guard was coming, if bread was being passed, if someone was about to crack, there was no time for signals, just eye contact. Look left, then down, danger, look right, then up, safe. Close your eyes briefly, reopen slow, food incoming. Blink twice rapidly, wait. One hard stare with no movement, stop now. None of this was taught formally. It spread in silence. The older prisoners used it without thinking. The new ones caught on quickly, or they didn't last long. It became instinct. During inspections, men lined up and stared forward. But within that motionless line, warnings moved fast. One glance down the row could alert 10 men that a search was happening. One held breath could freeze a room. It wasn't perfect. It relied on timing, on trust, on the ability to understand under pressure. But when used right, it saved food from being discovered. It hid stolen tools, it delayed beatings. It warned the right man to keep his head down and the wrong one to keep his mouth shut. One story, from outside Krakow, told of a prisoner who passed a spoon down 5 men using nothing but eye movement. Each knew when to reach, when to receive, and when to pass it forward. Not one word was spoken, not one guard noticed. It was choreography in stillness, a language not of sounds, but of survival. Eyes didn't lie, but they could signal. And those signals, learned in desperation, became the final form of trust between strangers. Because when everything else was gone, voice, strength, choice your only tool, was the look in someone else's eyes. And if they looked back, you weren't alone. This wasn't just a tactic. It was the last whisper of humanity in a place built to erase it. One forgotten skill, one more day alive. They weren't trained for this. No manual prepared them to ration silence. No drill sergeant taught them how to speak with blinks, bury warmth in ash, or hide bread under a corpse's shadow. These were not tactics of war. They were techniques of the forgotten, passed from one trembling hand to another, in glances and coughs, in the way a man touched his coat, or the way he fell, not from pain, but from calculation. What you've just witnessed wasn't history. It was resistance in its quietest form. Because for the men who lived through starvation, frost, and captivity, survival wasn't glory. It was method, precision, restraint. It was folding a breadcrumb into your sleeve and chewing it 3 hours later in silence. It was memorizing the rhythm of violence so your body could collapse before your spirit did. It was learning that even a spoon could be moved through a dozen hands without a single word spoken. They didn't all come home, but they left behind something most of the world never saw, something never written down, something never honored with medals. Skill, raw, improvised, unstoppable skill, the kind only learned at the edge of death. Now that you've seen what they carried, not on their backs but in their instincts, only one question remains. Will you carry it too? Because these lessons aren't just for remembrance, they're for what comes next. Subscribe, so that when the silence returns, you'll know how to listen. And when the world forgets again, you won't.